Hey, this is gonna be another one of those sad videos. Trigger warning, suicide, depression, all those fun stuff. So it was Memorial Day on Monday, and Memorial Day, more or less for pretty much the majority of the population, is kind of just a day for barbecues and hanging out with family. Most people get the day off work, and you just get to hang out and have a good time. And um, the whole point of Memorial Day is to like I don't know, to remember all the people that died in combat. And May is also the month of Mental Health Awareness Month, and something that it's actually talked about a lot more now, which is nice. But more people die from suicide than from you know any combat. There's a lot of veterans who commit suicide, and also a lot who overdose or suffer from alcoholism and complications of addiction. And it's nice that it's talked about a lot more, because I've heard a lot of stories of people who had family members in the military. Of course, I never served. I was not in the military. My grandpa was, but my grandpa died a few years after I was born, so I didn't really talk to him much. So my friends who have family in the military say that in the Marines, people would get discharged and they would have very obvious signs of PTSD. And the Marines pretty much just didn't even acknowledge it. They kind of just toss them off to the side because they didn't want to give them health care. I think that was the logic that they gave. They just didn't want to take accountability, because then they would have to financially take accountability for any treatment, something along those lines. This is I also saw a lot about how the modern Middle East stages of military activity is a lot different than Vietnam, because Vietnam and Korea were pretty much the jungle, and the Middle East was very urban environment. So coming back from war, from these urban environments into civilian life, it's very difficult. So this is that is something I hear. I don't really know too much. I have a lot of coworkers working, first responders made up of a lot of veterans. So I know a lot of them, and they all pretty much tell me very similar things. That every day they wake up and they're happy not to be in the military anymore. So it is interesting. I get to encounter a lot of people who were in the military, and it is also there's a huge amount of first responders who commit suicide. It's the biggest demographic, more than any other demographic. It's first responders. That would include police, firefighters, EMS. I think that's the three that get put under that umbrella term, first responder, and they have a huge amount of suicide rate. And I think it has to do a lot with, you see a lot of really traumatic things, much like the people who go to war, and you just are expected. Pretty much you go back to normal life after that. I've had a coworker who committed suicide, and I think about them a lot. They were pretty young, and they would complain to me, we would commiserate together about the job. But they would also they definitely had signs. They would basically verbalize suicidal ideation, and it's kind of just one of those things where it's oh, haha, we make jokes like that all the time, and I don't think we should. The jokes have definitely gotten a lot less funny, But like you just say like, oh, I hate my job so much, I want to kill myself. It's it's very sad. It's not as funny as it used to be. So I do think a lot about that. And there was a time when would think about like, oh, what else could I have done? But I think pretty much everybody at the hospital after that, pretty much it was like a very sobering experience. And we were all pretty much came together. There's a lot more emphasis on mental health. Not so much from like a top-down perspective. Like administration didn't like help our mental health at all. In fact, it hindered it for a lot of us. But we like staff, we would be we talked about our feelings a lot more. I guess would be the best way to describe it. And it was actually kind of nice. I mean, that's not a good way to put it, but it was refreshing that we kind of came together over this, and it was a pretty tight-knit group we had. I do think that like brought us together a lot. But a lot of people, it's, throughout like first responder community, commit suicide. And I think that it has to do a lot with this kind of reluctance to reach out for help. We're supposed to be the people helping. And it just places a huge amount of stress on us. The job, of course, occupational hazards. You go out there and you have to do a whole lot. You have to see a whole lot. You have to essentially like you have to change like how you treat people, people coming in like very like worst day of their lives type of thing. And you have to kind of be like a third person, essentially you have to be like a third person observer. You have to be able to help this person and not be like affected by like how terrible what you're seeing is. If you break your poker face, it's like the worst thing you could do. Somebody comes in, they're shot, and you go, ah, you can't scream. That's frowned upon. Screaming is frowned upon. Screaming, crying, throwing up, even if you want to. So in a lot of ways, you have to, for the job, have to have like this huge like you have to show no emotion essentially. So when you have that mentality of never showing emotion, you train yourself to show no emotion and not to freak out and have composure at all times. When you clock out of work, it's difficult to suddenly be like, oh, and now I turn it off. You train yourself this whole time to act a certain way, and it's hard to stop acting that way, just because your shift is over. You magically can turn on the emotions again, or at least the expressive emotions. So I think that has a lot to do with it. Not so much, I mean, yes, definitely the macho culture, first responder for sure. There's less macho culture in the ER, but like the hospital, but it's still like not much, it's still pretty macho culture. But definitely like the first responders have a really, really strong macho culture. You're not allowed to cry, pretty much is the whole thing. I'm not saying that crying would be like super helpful. However, I felt a lot better when I was able to like commiserate with my coworkers in a lot more healthy way. So yeah, I mean, I've talked about it before too, but I've also done a lot better on my coping mechanisms. Before it was, a lot of drinking, In college, I would smoke a lot of weed, and it really, it's just like not a good way to address your emotions at all, for sure. And I've gotten a lot better about finding other ways of dealing with stress. I have a really good group of friends that have been like really like good to me, and I have my family. I'm really happy that I'm like still around with my family. They're always really helpful for me. I got my dog, it's crazy how much just walking your dog can help you. Love my boy Carlos. And of course I have like exercise, I have this thing. And, it's a small thing, but just the fact that like I'm getting a little bit stronger every day, it does help like my psyche. And I take pride in it in a way that I haven't before. I was never like, I would exercise, but I didn't like, it wasn't my main way of coping, my main mechanism of coping. And, I used to like really like going out, partying with my friends, but that's really like, I really haven't done so much of that as of lately. And I think I'm better off. So I found a lot more healthy coping mechanisms. But yeah, it's insane. The amount of people that we see, it's like in the emergency department, that were veterans, are veterans. And, they just have a very, like, they're suffering from addiction. They're addicts. And it's really sad to see. I have friends that work in the VA. Those are like the hospitals that the veterans go to. And they tell me stories about how there's a lot of drug addicts. And I think about that all the time. Just how difficult it must be, finding that coping mechanism that's not going to destroy your life. It's hard. It's really hard to find coping mechanisms, finding that group of friends, or anyone that, you can commiserate with. I'm really lucky. My mom's in medicine. I talk to her about it all the time. If there's like a really bad patient, something that I see that, you can't unsee, I'm really lucky. So, I'm glad that I have my people. And yeah, basically that's all I really have to say. Mental Health Awareness Month. I wish I knew the phone number. I'll put it in the description. Logic had that terrible song about suicide, and the song title was that phone number. Shout out Logic. I like him. He was a good rapper, but I really hated that song. I thought the song was so cheesy. Not exactly something you should really say on your Mental Health Awareness Month post, but I really did think that song was cheesy. Yeah, that's kind of all. I hope everyone had a good Memorial Day. Had a lot of burgers and grills, partied with everyone. One of my coworkers said that Los Angeles has the best barbecues. You just have to leave early. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was funny. All right, that's all. Bye, guys.